Welcome to Inside Voices, a well-read magazine, Between the Pages podcast. I'm your host, Robert Gwaltney, joined by my friend and co-host, Jeffrey Dell Lofton. We're both really excited to enter into conversation today with Valerie Nieman. Valerie is the author of novels and short story and poetry collections. Her novel, In the Lonely Backwater, won the Sir Walter Raleigh Award and was a Foreword Indies Book of the Year finalist. Her critically acclaimed work includes To the Bones and Blood Clay. She's held a National Endowment for the Arts Creative Writing Fellowship. She's a professor emerita at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. She's also a former journalist. Her latest novel is Upon the Corner of the Moon. Welcome, Valerie.
Well, thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here with you.
We're happy to have you. So, Jeffrey, I'm just going to toss it over to you.
Okay, Val, it's so good to be in conversation with you. And I actually have a coveted copy of your book. Um, why did you feel compelled to write the story of Macbeth?
It's actually quite a long story. I'll try to compress. Um, when I was a child in the country, I found a copy of Charles and Mary Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare, in which they rewrote the plays into prose. And I read it and reread it. Didn't understand a whole lot of it, didn't matter. But I fell in love with the plots, which were amazing. There were, mad kings and wounded princes and lovers and tempests. There was so much. So I guess my father took note of that. And when I was, I think, 12 or 13, we had a traveling troupe come through doing Macbeth, and he took me. So that was my first live theatrical, other than, like school plays. And I was just enchanted. It was magnificent, drums and thunder, and, it was just, so I was hooked. So I've always loved Shakespeare, and I've loved Macbeth as one of the great tragedies. I like the tragedies the best. Um, and so some years ago, I was doing research for a different novel and came across the fact that Macbeth was not a murdering usurper, that he was a rightful king and ruled for 17 years. And I'm like, oh, how does that happen? And so I was just launched onto this obsession of finding out who the real Macbeth was and Lady Macbeth, and how this whole thing came to pass, that they were turned into icons of evil.
So you began your story, and I love this, with the childhoods of the main characters. Talk a little bit about why you chose that approach.
Well, of course, the name Macbeth, as soon as you say that, there are all these associations, witches and daggers and blood and, all sorts of very, negative images. And same with Lady Macbeth is, this super ambitious woman who then goes mad and is, rubbing her hands out, damn spot. So those are just the automatic things we think of. So I knew I couldn't start with them in their adulthood as king and queen, because the readers would have immediately like, ugh. Uh, so we are charged as writers with making characters relatable, if not always sympathetic. So I thought the only way to do this is to start from their childhood and also do the world building, because the Alaba of the time, or Scotland as we know it today, was a very, very different place.
So, you talked to, you started them off as children, but we think we know. You mentioned, the out damn spot, and the stories. We know Macbeth because of Shakespeare's play, but do tell us a little bit about the historical Macbeths.
Okay. And all hail Shakespeare. Otherwise, we'd never know about him.
Right.
He is on the king lists at the National Museum. His name is right there, but he would just be another obscure king. Uh, oh, I'm losing my way.
The
Who was
historical.
he? Who was he? Yes, Macbeth was, as I said, a rightful king. The At this time in the 11th century, the method of choosing a king upon the death of a king was not what we've come to expect of primogeniture. The oldest boy gets it, end of story, that's it. At this time, the kings were actually elected. All of the major noblemen would get together, the men of the blood, and they would say, okay, who among us has the most support, is the most able, is proven in battle, and they would elect the king. Now, they had to be from the bloodlines, so it wasn't exactly a democracy, but he was a lawful king and was a successful king. In his time, he was called the righteous and the ruddy king of plenty. Things were good. The land was mostly at peace after the Vikings, and the crops were good. 17 pretty much good years until near the end. So we know a fair amount about him. We know who his father was. We know his bloodlines. We know that he was able to sort of unify Alba into what we think of now as Scotland, because the province of Murray was his homeland and was called the Kingdom of the North. And it was quasi-independent or allied, depends on who you're talking to. But with him bringing his right to that kingdom in, it pretty much united Scotland in more or less the version that we see today. Otherwise, there'd be a big gap in the Northeast. Did you want
So
to talk about Lady Macbeth? Or
absolutely.
okay, we know very little about her. Her name is Gruach, and that's a really unpleasant name, isn't it? But that's her name. And she was the daughter of Boyd, who was one of the men of the blood, was actually the next in line to the throne. They always named somebody. That guy didn't always get elected, but there was somebody waiting. So he was next in line. King Malcolm II kind of had a habit of eliminating rivals. So Boyd eventually was killed. And in my imagining, Gruach and her brother Necton were sent away for fosterage far to the north into territories under the sway of Thorfinn the Great in Orkney. And so out of his reach, basically, in a very obscure place to protect them. So she's raised in the north and is raised again in my imagining, because we don't know, in the ancient triple goddess cultus, which underlay the Neolithic peoples and also the Picts, from what we know of them based on their symbol stones. So she's kind of a blank slate, and so I got to invent a lot.
Oh, how exciting.
You talked a little bit about, you mentioned, and my ear snagged on it, you talked a little bit about, so I'm going to first talk about world building and then research. You mentioned world building within the context of historical fiction. What does that look like? What does that mean?
Okay, great question. I've also written science fiction and horror, so world building is not new to me. In science fiction, you are literally often building a world, a planet, like think of Dune, where you've got to have the ecosystem and the people and all of those things. Usually in historical fiction, we pretty much know the territory, unless we're going quite far back or in a fairly unknown place. So I had to make this place based on research. And Alaba at the time was a Christian country, multi-ethnic. You had a lot of different ethnic streams in there. You had the Irish who had come across the channel, you had the Picts, you had the Norse who had taken chunks of it, you had the remnants of the Britons, you had the Anglians who had come up from Northumbria. So you had a lot of different ethnic groups in there. And trying to, reflect that, reflect the diversity of it, and also to make it true to the time period. Little things such as, did they have whiskey? No. Did they have kilts? No, definitely not. And did they even have coinage? That's something we just start taking, we take for granted, that somebody comes in and slaps down a coin and gets a bottle of whiskey or something. But in this time period, Alba or Scotland did not have coinage. Like the Viking realms, they used what was called hack silver, which was basically whatever silver you could get your hands on, you hacked it up into bits, and that was weighed. And so you had little pieces of whatever loot you'd had, and you weighed that, and that was the medium of exchange. There was coinage in the Anglo-Saxon realms, and there was coinage that came from the Far East. So you find these Arabic dirhams in hordes from this period. So there was coinage floating around, but Scotland itself did not have coins. So I'm getting really into the weeds here, but this is the kind of exciting things that you do when you're world building.
It's fascinating.
So it is, and so I know that I could hear the level of excitement in your voice about the world building, being passionate about that. I'm guessing that you're also, Val, very passionate about the research process as well. Talk a little bit about how you approach research, especially as it relates to this latest book.
Well, I really love research. If I had been pushed in certain directions, I think I could have ended up very happily being, a professor in the stacks for my whole life. But I didn't. I was a journalist. Um, the research for this started, and this is going to sound so antique, interlibrary loan. So I would, have my little list. I actually found one of those lists the other day of books that I ordered through the local library. And then they would arrive and I would pour through them and make notes. And I have crates of notes. I bought books. This was before the internet. So this is how you did it. When the internet came along, then, other new worlds opened up. And so I worked on this, through you know, book research for many years, off and on, off and on. And it was done, I thought, basically in 2014, but I thought, I don't know this place. I don't. I'm just getting things out of books, sometimes really useful, but most of my work has been set in Appalachia or the South. And so I know these places. I didn't know Scotland. So I decided I needed to go tramp around. So I bought a backpack, put 16 pounds worth of clothes, shoes, and pills and such in it, and headed off to Scotland. And people thought, of course, I was a bit mad. I mean, I was 59. I had never done a through hike. I had hiked, but I'd never done a through hike. And I started with the Great Glenway, which is 77 miles. Um, it was phenomenal. My legs ached. I got quite exhausted, but it was, to be out and to see the things that you see, the stones, the way the lochs look when the wind is coming down them, the mountains, the black slugs. I had no idea. Big black slugs on the trail. It's like, look at that. Who would have thought? So you just kind of, gather this stuff in. And I did the Great Glenway from the Atlantic Ocean to the North Sea. And then I did a lot of walking on the Murray coast. The Murray area is that's Macbeth land. I went to Orkney. Orkney was fantastic. All of the Neolithic monuments and the Brochs and, going through all of that and sort of getting the sense of the very early peoples and then again, the layers of, of other people who came in. It was just phenomenal. And I just soaked it in. So I went back and, revised, added. And then in 2023, I went back again and spent a good bit of time in the National Library and the National Museum, which was way cool if you're a geek like me. I got my National Library card in Scotland, and that was magnificent. I also did a lot of visiting small museums because those little museums have very interesting, quirky collections. So again, more research, more walking around, just trying to feel like I can see the past through the present. Sometimes it's very difficult, but trying to approach that.
Did anything make it into the book that wouldn't have otherwise made it in had you not taken your trips over there?
I think it would have been thinner as a book, but when I've walked on the beach at Rosemarkie and I know what the sand looks like and that you can see the headland of Cromarty over there, when going to Dunotter and being in that ruined fortress, which is not the one from the 11th century, but there was one there. And so, what it looked like in that place, what you can see up and down the shore. What else wouldn't have been in there? Oh, an amazing thing that I learned by being there was that the trees in Scotland are aliens. There were all of these forested slopes, all of these, woods, and I'm tramping through the woodlands and stuff. And I met a man from Trees for Life, which is a group that's trying to rewild Scotland. And he said, well, those are all Sitka spruce and Douglas fir. basically, Scotland, like Ireland, was pretty much cut over by the people themselves, but especially by the English to build their ships and feed their furnaces, and denuded. And so then these plantations were put in, but they're trees from the Pacific Northwest. They don't belong there. And so
Really?
it's a really dead ecosystem. So they're trying to cut down these plantations and replant with the Scots pine, oak, beech, ash, the things that should be there, and bring back the animals that should be there, like the capercaillie and the grouse and the red squirrels. I had a hard time seeing red squirrels. They stay very high in the trees. So that was something I learned by on a train talking with this man.
Fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, I would be curious to know, I know that within your research process, and we've already talked a little bit about fleshing out the story of historical characters, who've lived so long ago. But how did you approach trying to capture the culture of the time? Did anything in particular surprise you?
Well, of course, I was trying to go by what we know. I mean, we know, for instance, that Macbeth was literate and apparently rather pious. He gave a lot of money to churches, and he did a pilgrimage to Rome, which was noteworthy and entered in the chronicles of the city because he walked around giving money to poor people. And that wasn't something kings did. They gave money to the church and built, some big building. They didn't walk around handing money to beggars. So he seems to have been rather deeply inculcated in Christian beliefs. Well, we know they were Christian, but there's Christian and Christian, right? So, but he seems to have really sort of lived it. So I thought, well, I need to work backward and forward on who this person is. We know that much. We know he was a nobleman. We know where he came from. But I had to think, well, how would he have gained this particular thing, this literacy, this Christianity? So I decided somebody had to teach him. So I made up a monk named Oswald, who was an Angle, and who was kind of his not just his teacher of Latin and Greek, but his teacher about ethics. There's a lot of attention to ethics, Christian ethics, classical ethics that would have guided him. So his upbringing, kind of his Bildungsroman of who this person was, that I tried to shape from the little fragments that we know. And one thing is that he and Duncan were cousins and only a few years apart in age. So the idea of the old Duncan being stabbed in his bed, no. Uh, so I thought, okay, they're the same age. And I can't remember, this is awful. I can't remember if I actually know that they were fostered together at the court or if I kind of interpolated it. But I have them at the court together, of their grandfather, King Malcolm II. And so you've got two boys. And of course, you've got then competition between the two. Duncan's older, and we know later he was not a good king. He didn't last. 4 years before he made a big mistake. Um, he tried to invade places that were very poor choices. And in this time, if you were not successful in battle, that was a really bad thing. So I thought, well, what kind of person would he have been? Probably still impetuous, not very thoughtful, and perhaps a bit of a bully. So here you've got the two boys, and Macbeth more scholarly, Duncan, the competition between them, and all of the conflict that you would have through the years. And there's a lot of that in the book as the two of them sort of, bang up against each other. And of course, then Duncan does become king. He's selected and becomes king. And what happens as a result of that? So, yeah, that's my going. I'm trying to think of anything else about, again, Gruach, I had to kind of just make up. So,
Now, Upon the Corner of the Moon is a gorgeous title. Talk a little bit about that title, and was that the original working title of your book, Val?
oh no, I can
No.
never do titles. I am the worst on titles. I'm terrible. And so, I had all of these different titles, and I sent it out under different titles to agents, and editors and on and on and on. And finally, it landed at Regal House, and we couldn't come up with a title. And Janie came up with this, which is from the speech in Shakespeare when the Queen of the Witches, Hecate, says, upon the corner of the moon, there hangs a pendulous drop that, when distilled, will raise such sprites. And I don't know the rest of it, although I need to learn it because I'm going to be reciting it in a performance soon. But I'll learn it. So that's where it comes from Shakespeare. And it is beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's lovely. So, Bella, I also know that this is the first, Upon the Corner of the Moon is the first of two books. Is there anything that you can talk about with us regarding the next one?
Well, the second one picks up the end of the first book. Macbeth and Gruach have met and have agreed to marry. It's a bit of a business partnership in some ways at this point. So the second book is going to have the events which take place. Malcolm dies, Duncan becomes king. Macbeth supports him, including in a couple of these disastrous ventures. And then Duncan makes the mistake of deciding, well, I know where I can, get a win and grab some loot. I'll go beat up my cousin. And he invades Murray and doesn't work out as he plans, and he is killed in battle. And so from there, Macbeth becomes king, and we have the events that we know. We do know about the pilgrimage. We do know certain battles. And but a lot of what I focus on actually is the dynamics of Macbeth and Gruach as they grow together and come to love one another. And they have her son, whom Macbeth has adopted. And so the whole family sort of thing. I'm just at the point now in writing the second book where the son, Lulach, has come back from his fostering. And the tension and the difficulty between a father and son when they haven't seen each other for 10 years. He's been gone being fostered. And so I had him actually in Normandy. We don't know. And so how do you reconnect? How do a father and son reconnect? So there's a lot of family dynamics in it, as much as, the historical. I'm really interested in the people. And I think about, people I admire, of course, Hilary Mantel, where, you get into the people and their lives, not just the events. And of course, the first book is much about their lives.
So, Val, it looks like we are getting close to the end of our time together. It's flown by. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Upon the Corner of the Moon. Jeffrey and I wish you every success with this book and the next one. You'll have to come back when the next book comes out and talk about that one as well.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Gentle listeners, until next time, for Inside Voices, I'm Robert Gwaltney.
And I'm Jeffrey Dale Lofton. And remember, to be creative is to be courageous. Thanks for joining us.